Hi, my name is Karen Sudmeier. I'm a senior researcher at the University of Lausanne and a training and education consultant with the United Nations Environment Program. So this video will be about the importance of ecosystem-based disaster risk reduction and adaptation. We'll then go over a case study related to Nepal and Eco-DRR, or ecosystem-based disaster risk reduction. We'll then look at science, technology, and Eco-DRR linkages, and incorporating local knowledge with Eco-DRR. And finally, we'll conclude with main points. Let me start with an example on the importance of ecosystem-based disaster risk reduction, with an example from Tropical Storm Jeanne, which hit the island of Hispaniola in 2004. This island is split between Haiti and Dominican Republic. Haiti, unfortunately, lost over 6,000 people during this tropical storm, whereas in Dominican Republic, 18 people lost their lives. There were over $7 billion US in damages. This slide shows the border between Haiti on your left and Dominican Republic on the right. This also explains why so many more people lost their lives during Tropical Storm Jeanne than in Dominican Republic, mainly due to debris flow and flooding. Most of the 18 people who lost their lives in the Dominican Republic are actually living on the border between both countries. So as we can see, ecosystem-based approaches are extremely important for reducing disaster risk. This slide shows Yala National Park, which was hit by the Indian Ocean tsunami in 2004. In the red circle, you see an ecotourism resort, which is naturally nestled behind the sand dunes. During the tsunami, only 5 centimeters of water entered the ecotourism resort, and there were no casualties. This slide shows the Yala Safari Resort, which had cut down the sand dunes for better sea views. Unfortunately, during the tsunami, 27 people lost their lives after a 7-meter high wave hit the resort. It also really demonstrates the importance of sand dunes as natural buffers against tsunamis. This slide shows the importance of vegetation as a protection against coastal hazards. This image is from Senegal and shows mangroves that are protecting the coast against erosion and sea surges. This image from southern France demonstrates how wetlands can act as buffers against flooding, as it offers space for excess rainwater. Here we see how forests can reduce occurrence of mountain hazards. This is a protection forest in Davos, Switzerland, which protects the town from avalanches, rockfall, and landslides. So we can say that ecosystems are one of the few approaches that address all 3 components of the risk equation. Hazards. We just saw several examples how ecosystems can act as natural buffers for reducing or mitigating hazards. Ecosystems provide many services, such as food and fiber, and can reduce the vulnerability of populations before, during, and after disasters. So ecosystems can reduce exposure by functioning as natural buffers with elements at risk. And this slide shows a forest that was planted on a steep slope in Afghanistan. So it acts both to stabilize the slope, but also when you have trees in an area that's very dangerous, people do not actually live there. So it reduces their exposure in this way as well. So how do we find Eco-DRR? Eco-DRR is the sustainable management, conservation, and restoration of ecosystems to reduce disaster risk with the aim of achieving sustainable and resilient development. Very similar is the concept of ecosystem-based adaptation, or EBA, which involves the use of biodiversity and ecosystem services through sustainable management, conservation, and restoration of ecosystems to help people adapt to the adverse effects of climate change. This diagram explains the benefits of various types of approaches to disaster risk reduction. Eco-DRR and EBA provide disaster prevention and recovery. In addition, they provide hazard mitigation, climate change adaptation, water, soil, and air purification, livelihoods benefits, biodiversity, CO2 sequestration, recreation, as compared to more classical engineering or gray approaches to hazard mitigation and disaster prevention, which mainly focus on these 2 goals. Hybrid approaches combine both, offer maximum protection in many cases. An example would be combining protection forests with para-avalanche barriers. We also know that Eco-DRR approaches are often more cost-effective and increase in strength over time, such as soil bioengineering, which combines small civil engineering structures with deep-rooted plant species. Now, these may take longer to be established, but they require much less maintenance over the long run as compared to purely civil engineering approaches to hazard mitigation. We will see a case study on soil bioengineering in Nepal later in this video. Let me give some examples of Eco-DRR approaches, which include integrated coastal zone management, integrated water resource management, protected area management, integrated fire management, and sustainable land management. These are all natural resource management approaches that have been around for decades, yet which are only recently beginning to incorporate disaster risk reduction. For example, integrated coastal zone management is mainly about managing coastal resources with multiple stakeholders and can include and should include early warning and evacuation provisions. And finally, community-based natural resource and risk management, as well as gender issues, are cross-cutting to all of these Eco-DRR approaches. Now I would like to introduce a case study on Eco-DRR in Nepal, where we look more in detail on soil bioengineering for stabilizing slopes. I would like to introduce the case study, which covers the project Ecosystems Protecting Infrastructure and Communities, or EPIC, which is a 5-year project in 6 countries seeking to understand the role of ecosystems in reducing disaster risk. It is managed by the International Union for Conservation of Nature, or IUCN, together with University of Lausanne, with funding from the government of Germany. In Nepal, the project's objectives are to enhance local knowledge and national uptake of bioengineering, or eco-safe roads, build capacity of local and national actors, development, environment, and DRR actors, with regards to Eco-DRR and bioengineering, and finally to mainstream Eco-DRR into local, national, and global policies. Let's watch this short video clip which explains the context for why we're working on this topic in Nepal.
One of the main priorities of the government of Nepal for the past decade has been the construction of rural roads, connecting villages to towns and cities. Having a road is extremely important for a village as it gives them access to markets, to education, healthcare, especially employment. However, one of the issues with rural roads is that many of them have been funded and constructed by communities themselves, such as this rural road that you see on the hilltop behind us. This rural road was constructed about 5 years ago and unfortunately triggered an old landslide and is causing a very dangerous situation to the villages below it. It's also creating a lot of debris flow and has buried several hectares of productive agricultural land, creating economic losses and also high risk to the population. These types of landslides are triggered by roads are actually one of the main triggers of shallow landslides and one of the greatest sources of environmental degradation in Nepal today.
This diagram illustrates in more detail what we saw in the video clip. We see a new road that has triggered an old landslide. This landslide is creating debris, which is being transported downslope to the bottom of the mountain, where a huge deposition zone is now burying agricultural lands. So the EPIC project established 3 demonstration sites in western Nepal near the Pokhara area, in which one of the villages had highly degraded slopes, partly due to grazing pressure, but especially due to poor water management along a locally constructed road. The image to the right shows the same site 2 years later after we had installed small drainage structures along the road and employed various bioengineering techniques involving the plantation of various bamboo species to stabilize the gullies. All this was undertaken in collaboration with the local community, which continues to monitor the site and is now interested in expanding the bioengineering works to other heavily degraded slopes. This road is now open during the monsoon and provides fodder grasses for the community livestock. Another of our activities included a so-called rhizotrone, where we planted 8 different species of grasses with deep roots that were selected by the community as most appropriate plant species for bioengineering. We also installed a micro-weather station at the 3 sites, which are being cared for by the local communities. And finally, we're quantifying ecosystem services at each site, or the extent to which vegetation is reducing erosion rates. We are doing this using state-of-the-art technology called LiDAR, which uses laser light to measure distance with high accuracy. For more information on this case study, see the video clips from my colleague Sanjaya Devkota, who is a Nepali civil engineer and specialized in bioengineering.
Basically, we are using the grass species and some fodder species to stabilize the shallow landslide and also to improve the degraded land slope. Here, this is the area here is basically an open grazing land area where people used to graze their animals. And when we visited this area 2 years ago, we found it's a very nice place to establish a demonstration site. I would try to reach to the community people, and we start talking with the people and asking them to give this area for the demonstration site. And we visited a couple of times at that time. People were not very convinced in the beginning. We took support from the District Soil Conservation Office, IUCN, and also UNIL. And after a couple of meetings, the people were convinced, and to give the part of this area to establish the bioengineering demonstration site. This is the area where we implement our resource technique. It's all about soil bioengineering, where we implement the low-cost and technique of bioengineering in consultation with the local people. We also try to apply the simple civil engineering component to protect, to stabilize these gullies. Where we can see the different plant, we apply this broom grass technique, where it's a live fencing technique actually, and we also applied some other species that's really very good for protecting the soil slope. We also establish one test plot where we are monitoring the root system of the different plant species. We are looking for root architect, and then the drought resistant species that may be very good for the bioengineering technique. Altogether here we planted 8 different species, not only in the test plot but also in the this gully protection and all the roadside slope stabilization works.
I would like to wrap up this video by commenting on the importance of science and technology at various levels to better understand how ecosystems can contribute to disaster risk reduction, from state-of-the-art LiDAR technology to using local knowledge in establishing plant test plots. Finally, it is by combining local knowledge with formal science that we have been able to achieve promising results, which are now being multiplied at the local level and are also being communicated to national policymakers to effect more sustainable road construction practices in Nepal. I'd like to wrap up this video with some main points. The first is that Eco-DRR can offer many additional benefits over traditional disaster management practices. Second is that they can often be more cost-effective over the long run. However, we need to recognize that ecosystems often have some limitations and can be beneficial in combination with more traditional engineering approaches. And finally, by combining local knowledge with formal science, this can be an effective and empowering approach to disaster risk reduction.